Welcome to the Engage with Tech podcast, where we'll be bringing in different tech professionals in each episode to talk to them about their experiences within the tech industry at the moment. So today we're joined by Luke Williams, who's Group Head of AI at Intergage Group. Today we'll be talking to him about the utilization of AI, how it can be implemented into business processes, and how as candidates you can leverage the tool. So without further ado, let's get started. So hi there, Luke. It's an absolute pleasure to have you as our first guest on the Engage with Tech podcast. As Group Head of AI, I can imagine it's been a whirlwind of the past few years. There's lots been going on in the tech industry. Let's just jump straight into it. What have you been working on recently? What sort of projects have you been doing?
Sure. So, hi. First of all, thanks, and thanks for having me on. It's an honour to be here. My role is as Group Head of AI at Intergage. So, we're a group of B2B marketing companies. It sounds a ridiculously fancy job title. I don't have other people working under me in AI, but my role is at a group level to make sure across the whole range of companies we have that we're making best use of AI. So, for us, what that means is managing the tools we use, creating playbooks, running training for clients and partners on adopting AI into their business. And so, I get to look across a wide range of tools and experiment with stuff and see how I can apply it across the business, really.
That's perfect. So it's evident you're extremely passionate about AI and its capabilities. Where do you think this passion first stemmed from then?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a Bournemouth University graduate, and from my very first job, and this is going to date me and tell you how old I am straight away. But my very first job, straight from uni, was moving people from fax to email and explaining how to use this new scary technology called email, and why it was probably better than the fax machines they had littered everywhere across this business. What I've always loved and enjoyed is, at heart, I am a geek. I've always been interested, in technology. As a kid, I wanted to make robots. That was kind of my, 7-year-old Luke said that's what he wants to do when he grows up. And I've also always enjoyed training and presenting and speaking to people. So, I worked in radio for some years as well. And I think really, for me, AI and previously with social media and other things I've done, exploring and explaining how to use technology has been a big driving factor for me. I love and enjoy working with people, and I love and enjoy solving problems. And it's kind of the point where they come together with a love of technology that I've always had.
Okay, that's brilliant. So I can imagine the tech landscape has evolved so much since you first started and at university. And I'm just wondering what AI's capabilities are now and how do you personally use it?
Sure. So I think one of the things I'm really passionate about, which I speak a lot about at workshops and seminars and things I get asked to speak at, is that I don't honestly believe most people are aware how good the technology has got and how capable it is. So we've gone from a point where 2 years ago, really, we had a fairly convincing sort of text to text chatbot. So, GPT 3.5 came out and you could ask it questions on anything. So we had artificial intelligence before, but that was what we would call narrow artificial intelligence. So it was doing specific things, whereas really that step forward was in having a general text-based chat window where it could, you could ask it anything. Its results may vary in how good it was in response, but that was really a significant turning point. Where it was convincing and useful. What we've seen since then is, one of the examples I use quite often at talks is if you ask AI to generate a picture of two dogs in a field, 18 months ago, you'd get a weird hybrid beast with sort of 5 legs and maybe 2 heads, and it sort of looked like a dog. Whereas now you'd get a photorealistic image that it's hard to spot any, quirks in it that make it obviously AI. And I think we're seeing, AI fakes are causing problems. AI generated images are starting to cause problems in various places. Just before Christmas, there was a lot of people on TikTok and Instagram being fooled by these rock mug things that I think was floating around, where the reality was actually some horrible resin product that certainly wasn't a crystal or whatever else they're being sold as. And also now we're starting to see text to video and text to audio being very, very convincing. And the advanced speech models are gaining real-time video access. So, on my phone, I can hold it up and show it things and talk to the AI in real time about the things that are around me, and it can help me out with that. And when I present to an audience, I would say usually maybe 10% of people are aware of most of the capabilities that are out there. When you look at the intelligence of some of the models, especially when you look at O3 that was announced from OpenAI just before Christmas, they're starting to score very highly on a very wide range of human capable tasks. So, not just being a sort of spicy autocomplete, which is a phrase that I love to use to describe how large language models work, but also, with their connection to the internet, with reasoning and doing more at the inference time rather than just in the training. We're starting to see some really, really capable models. O3 scored above the human level. This was a thing called the ARC AGI test. Some people held that as a benchmark for, when an AI became as capable or better than a human. I think it's quite a narrow test, so I don't subscribe to that personally. But I think certainly we're starting to see, PhD level intelligence in certain fields and in certain methods of operation.
Yeah. Personally, I find that pretty scary, but I can also see the application of it as well, used for good. So could you maybe talk to me a little bit about what we could be doing in terms of tech for good and using Gen AI?
Yeah, I think there's these greater capabilities are already unlocking some really great things. So, personally, I drive an electric van, and one of the things that's really advanced is material science. So, developing and identifying new potential battery combinations. So, solid state batteries are partly a product of an AI project, and that's going to lead to there's batteries already now available in China that will do 800 to 1,000 miles on sort of 20-30 minutes of charge time. That's game changing. They're solid state, so they're much more safe. Electric car batteries are generally safer than petrol cars anyway, but they're even safer still. And we're also seeing developments in medical applications. So there's a model that can it outperforms the best doctors at spotting breast cancers, for example. That's again a narrow form of AI, but it's been helped by these kind of things there. And we're starting to see opening up of applications in all sorts of fields, from green technologies to healthcare, I think particularly.
So the use cases was actually how we first met, because I remember I interviewed you as part of my dissertation, which looked at the impact of generative AI on brand storytelling for marketing. So it's slightly different from the conversation that we're having now, which is more revolved around tech. But you also spoke about AI and whether it is a friend or foe of marketeers. So that was an event that we held at Bournemouth University. And from those two things, there were three key points which I remember. So you always thought that AI should be used as a tool. It's most impactful when used in conjunction with the human touch. And three, it should be used mainly for a source of ideation. So I'm really interested to see whether your opinion has changed from that point, which was about 6 months ago, or in fact, it stayed the same.
Yeah, so I think, absolutely, AI should be used as a tool. I think I'm still absolutely a big proponent that it's best used in conjunction with humans. I think I'm, despite being technology an optimist, I guess, generally, I do think that the kind of last 5% of what an AI could do is going to take a long time and requires human touch. So, for example, here at Intergage, we have a 15-step content checklist. So anything like blog post or whatever it is that we create for a client or for ourselves goes through a 15-step checklist to make sure that it's edited by a human before it's published. And I think that's an important kind of idea that I try and share wider as much as I can. In terms of it being specifically a resource for a sort of ideation, I think that's one of the key use cases. I'm not sure if I would say that that's the only or the main one. I think it can certainly be used across all stages of a project, so from ideation, strategy through to development. I think something that's expanded a lot in the last 6 months is the use of AI in research. So Perplexity has got a lot better. We've seen Search GPT and also the Google Deep Search tool. So where we've now got large language models that have access to the internet can do really effective research from a fairly simple prompt. So I think that's certainly something that's changed and developed over the last 6 months or so. I think also the quality of imagery from text to images, or using tools like Adobe Firefly within Photoshop. I think it's really hard now for people to spot AI generated or amended images. And certainly I'd have said maybe even 6 months ago, you could generally spot an artifact here or there, or maybe an extra finger or something in a hand. But I think they've got really good now. So I think that's certainly changed. But yeah, no, I'm still a big believer that humans should be in the loop. I think where you see people promoting a kind of, there's almost like a get rich quick scheme mentality to some sort of AI proponents, where they're sort of about, you can generate 100 blog posts in 10 minutes kind of thing. But they're crap. They're obviously AI. They might give you a short-term effect, but actually, what we've seen, there was a guy who, I think he copied something like 10,000 blog articles from his largest competitor. And yeah, he absolutely smashed them on SEO for about a month. And then his site was just completely delisted. It's with any technology, using it safely, effectively, efficiently, but also legally and ethically are really important. And that's something when I do training, I do also talk about. It's not just, here's this shiny thing and how you can use it, but also here's how you probably should use it, or here are some of the conversations as a business you should have about how you use it. And I think having a human in the loop is really important.
So do you think that if you use AI in conjunction with the human touch, that there's an enhanced productivity then? So
Yep.
is that what you're
Yeah,
suggesting?
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so take the example. Let's think of an example from my world. Yeah, so one of my sales guys, I work with him. So we use a tool called Fireflies to record sales calls. And first of all, we're really transparent to say we do so. And one of the things it does is it transcribes the call with AI. You can do this in Teams and Zoom and other things as well. And there's a number of tools that will do it. That's just the one we tend to use. But what we then did is we said, right, let's write a prompt to take that transcript and let's make sure we ask some specific questions within that call. And then what I can do is I take the transcript, put it into ChatGPT, put this prompt in that we've pre-written, and it will then pull out the key bits of information. And we've got 3 prompts. So the first one generates a summary for the customer. So then he just needs to check through that, and it will look for those questions, and it will pull out the key bits and put it into the right headings. The second one will create a summary to go into our CRM, so into our database, to say, here's what we talked about with this customer, here's where the opportunities might be. And then the third one is it will start on a sales proposal based on those questions again and other bits of information. And he reckons, that saves him a couple of days a week. So he's able to have more calls and then do that.
Wow.
But what's really important is he goes through and checks the output of all 3 sections of those. And I think there's a lot of people that are selling this kind of myth that it's just going to do everything for you. The danger there is, it gets names wrong, it gets brand names wrong, it gets people's names wrong, it gets company names wrong, and you can quickly get people offside with those kind of obvious things. So, checking references, checking the summary, also understanding from our side, is the proposal that's started to put together, is that right for us and the client? It's good at that stuff, but you still need to give it that check. And yeah, it probably takes about 70-80% of the time away from him, where previously he'd have been writing up his notes after the call rather than transcribing it. He will still make the odd notes as he goes through, of course. But, the level of note-taking doesn't need to be as detailed as it was perhaps before. He can just pull out the key points he really wants to make sure in the proposal. The prompts are just copy and paste once you've got the transcript, and then get those three outputs, and then just review them. It reckons it saves about 70-80% of his time on that process, which means he can have more real calls with people. And it's not doing anyone out of a job directly. It just means he's more efficient. And, let's be honest, no one wants to sit and listen back to a call and write down all the points from it in fine detail for 2 hours. It always takes longer to do that going back through a call than it does to have the call in the first place. Transcribe it, you can just take 20 minutes to go through and then edit it afterwards. And I think that's the kind of use cases I'm really passionate about working on, where it's taking away a task that isn't value added. It isn't using the human brain most effectively. It's taking away kind of some of the grunt work, if you like, and making you have more time for valued work. And that's the way that I always advise businesses to aim with this kind of thing.
Generative AI will not replace people, but people who use generative AI will replace those who don't. What do you think? That was a statement by Harvard Business School professor Karim Lakhani. So this was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's something you hear very often. I hear it in a lot of talks that people give. I did see, yesterday, I did see a cartoon rebutting this, which made me laugh quite a lot. I don't think it's quite accurate, but it did make me chuckle. So it was, so going back to Henry Ford and the motor car, the classic quote there, which some people say he didn't say, was, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they'd have said a faster horse. And he said, did a horse with a car replace a horse? No, it was a car. And that was kind of the guts of the cartoon, which did make me stop and go, actually, a lot of people reuse that quote. A lot of people don't attribute it. I do agree with it, though, because I think I agree with it as a direction as much as I'm slightly on the fence of its accuracy, if you like. So I think as a business, your aim should be to have people using generative AI and AI more generally, rather than replacing people. But there will be some changes in the workforce. One of the parallels I think you can draw is probably around the time when spreadsheets were first invented. The Association of Bookkeepers in America kicked up a big fuss and said, this is going to decimate the bookkeepers that work around the country. And absolutely it did. If you look at the graph of, bookkeepers as a profession across that time frame, sort of late 80s, early 90s, absolutely declines down to near zero. But if you look at management accountants, it went up by more over the same time frame. So what you see there is actually, yes, if you look at it with a narrow lens, there are job losses. And I think we are seeing some retraction in some areas. So, things like content writers, I know people that use Fiverr are finding it harder to get work these days, but they're doing more stuff that's like editing or real value pieces. But if you look in a wider lens, there were more management accounting jobs because suddenly the basic stuff got easier, so you could do the more advanced stuff. And I think that's what we'll see. We might see a move to more solo businesses as well, I think, because suddenly as an individual, I can do more bits of business in a realistic time frame. One of the challenges, and I've grown and sold a business, is always at what point do I bring someone in to do these bits versus doing it myself, right? But actually now if you're able to do more bits of it yourself, you don't lose that control and that quality of it being your vision, but you can remove some of those more arduous tasks other ways, and then just get professionals in to do the real good bits. So an accountant to review your accounts, a copywriter to edit your stuff rather than necessarily produce it. So what we'll see then is we'll see a lot more small businesses potentially and the support services that they need. So again, I think if you look with narrow lens, there will be fields impacted. There undoubtedly are starting to be, some customer service agents. I forget which company it is, but one of the big companies that works in B2C got rid of a load of their customer service people recently because they were able to do it more effectively using a chatbot. But the people they kept are doing more valued, deeper conversations. And, as much as they can, they've repurposed those other people to do their sort of outreach work. So going onto social media and responding to things out in the wild more than just the comments that come into them. And those are decisions that all businesses are going to have to make. But by doing that, rather than just straight out removing people, they're adding more value to their business rather than just cutting costs. So these are decisions that a lot of businesses are going to have to make. And, for me, that difference in the bookkeeping, management, accounting graphs, which are pretty much an X, it's a skills issue, not a job issue. And I think that's something really important to say to your listeners, and also something that I say a lot when I speak at events is, yes, there are going to be changes. There's going to be some winners and some losers. And I think one of the things I talked about at the sort of friend or foe event, and subsequently at other, I've been lucky enough to speak at a couple of other universities since then, is that, there are jobs that have come and gone within the last 20 years. Making NFTs was profitable for about maybe a year for some people and is now a complete nothingness. If I look back at when I was first getting into the world of technology, people were making millions from selling ringtones. That's just not a thing anymore. Jobs will come and go. Bitcoin mining at home, you can't really do that now as an individual. You'd have to have a whole server farm. That's another example of technology that's come and gone over the last 5-10 years, maybe even. I think it's a skills issue. I think everyone needs to become more adaptable, but it's also a bonus. No one wants to sit, write up a transcript for a call, for example. Yes, there were people doing that as a service, and I do feel bad for them, but they will be moving into other areas where reviewing those transcripts perhaps is more important.
I found a stat the other day on LinkedIn that was talking about jobs on the rise in 2025, and it said 55% of the roles now weren't a thing 25 years ago. So it just shows that evolution is occurring so quickly. And it also said the two driving factors of those were AI and sustainability. So you can see that the roles that are opening up as well as a consequence.
Yeah, no, completely. And I think we're also in a weird point at the moment where I think particularly in sort of a business to commercial landscape, user acceptance of AI is probably behind, or knowledge as well, is probably behind where the actual technology is. So we set up as an experiment, a little website for a project I've been working on called Campfire with Dorset Chamber, which I'm hoping we'll get to at some point because I think it's really important and great to
we certainly will.
And we set up a little website where you can put in your name and phone number, and an AI voice clone of my boss would call you back, and you can ask it questions and interact with him to ask it anything about the training. Now, when we first set it up in, I think, July, August time, the large language models and the processing and lag time made it so that there were sort of awkward pauses in the conversation that made it not work naturally. But now the model has improved so much that you can have an almost natural conversation with, not my boss, on the phone, and ask it, any question you want. And if you go off on tangents, obviously we put guardrails in to bring you back in. And actually, it's got really effective. But the question there is not what can the technology do? It's, do I expect that? So if I ring my doctor's surgery, for example, do I want to be screened by an AI or a receptionist? I might be less comfortable with an AI doing that. I might be more comfortable. It depends on the person, I'm sure. But if I'm ringing my broadband provider because I need to get an update, and I've got the option rather than being on hold for 40 minutes, let's be honest, it's usually quite a long time for those kind of people, or I can press 1 and get through to an AI agent who can probably answer, say, 95% of the queries that I want, I'm probably happy doing that. So I think there's also going to be these trade-offs when you look at what applications have we got for AI, not just can it do it, but will it do it, and should we do it? Does this fit with us as a brand? And also, is it what our customers expect? And I think one of the other things we found is we've been experimenting a lot with SMS and WhatsApp AI conversations particularly for sort of not lead gen, but like warming up leads that have gone dead, perhaps. So taking leads from people that inquired about a product, say, a year ago. We've done a couple of thousand. I don't think once someone has asked us if we're a bot. I don't think even once in the examples I've seen someone's asked if it's a bot, because one, it speaks in WhatsApp like it's a human person, and just to be clear, we're really transparent that it is that. But two, it gets done what they need to do. If they say they're not interested, it just leaves it. If it wants to book an appointment, it's got access to the calendar, it can book the appointment, and at that point, it hands it over to a human salesperson. But I don't think I've seen any of the chat logs I've reviewed, or I'm not aware of anyone asking, are you a bot? Are you a robot? Are you AI? And I think things like chatbots on websites, I think people are quite used to speaking to quite crap chatbots on websites. If they just get better with AI, I don't think that's a problem. But again, like I said, if you rang a business and you spoke to an AI clone of someone, I think you might be a bit unnerved by it. So it's how and when do we use it is just as important as can it do these things.
And then it comes the question, is there an over-reliance on Gen AI? If so, what does this over-reliance look like? How do we sort of defeat that over-reliance? How do we overcome it?
Yeah. Yeah, so I
And
think one of the things we look at here is, when I joined, I went through and spoke to everyone about how they do their jobs, where they use AI at the moment. Did a bit of a sort of an audit of the tools that are out there, and I think the first thing to say on that is, there are some free or cheap tools available for AI that completely hoover up your data. There are things where, for example, there's a couple of generate some LinkedIn headshots, load in 5 photos and it'll create a new one for you to use that are just purely there to train on faces. So they're free because they're training on your face. We go do a bit of review of the tools that are out there and make sure, we're not doing anything that could endanger client data or confidentiality or any of those things, or personal identifiable information of customers or their customers. Looking at what are the use cases. So where are there ways we could maybe improve something? So like that sales process I mentioned earlier. But then the next step for me is writing it up as a playbook. So writing up, so we have a format we use that looks at, who's the expert in it, what do I need before I get started, here are the prompts or bits of software and how I use them to get this job done effectively. And then, what are the checks we have at the end? And then we share that, and, we have a SharePoint site where these are all linked together. I think we're up to about 16 or 17 of those for our kind of core functions, some of them internal, some of them client-facing. That's really helped us because I think we were in danger that we had a couple of people who were really good using generative AI, and to come to your sort of over-reliance point, if we were relying on them and one of them left, we'd lose that knowledge. Whereas by documenting it in a playbook, we get consistency. We know we've got checks in place. We know we ask all the right questions to make sure we do it effectively. And also it can be picked up by other people easier. Those people that were experts on it can just review that as we go through. But also, it widens it out to more people. So I think you can avoid over-reliance on generative AI by making sure you're not using tools that might disappear one day because they're a one-man band that are just harvesting data. So having checks on the tools you use, having use cases and playbooks written up for the way that you use tools, and also by having a strategic approach to it. We wouldn't want to rely on one tool that was a key part of our whole business and not have a potential backup in mind, or not know who they are and where they were founded and how long they've been around and who owns them and where our data goes and all of those kind of things. So I think we probably avoid an over-reliance on generative AI by having a suite of tools and all of those checks in place that we have.
So it's extremely important how you implement and control the process, I think, isn't it? That's what I've got from what you said there. And I suppose that brings me on to AI Campfire, the project that you're working on right now. So could you maybe tell me a little bit more about that, what it involves, how people can get involved themselves?
Yeah, so over the last year, I've been doing quite a lot of workshops and talks, and there were sort of some common factors or common questions and things that kept coming up. And I think one of those was, particularly for small and medium-sized businesses, how do we adopt AI? And so we've worked with Dorset Chamber to develop a half-day training course and a community site, which we'll be launching towards the end of the month. So this is a half-day workshop, so not just about what is AI and how does it work and understanding how, things like how to prompt well and talking about use cases, but also how do you adopt AI in an organisation? So how do you work out what your use cases might be? How do you assess the tools you can use for that? How can you write up a playbook to give people a fighting chance to do that? What are the strategic things you need to think about? What are the tactical things, the operational things, and the communication things? Because I think something that is lost in a lot of businesses, for example, is that they'll have pockets of people using AI, but not a consistent place where they either share it or talk about what they're using, or have a strategy for which bits they're going to try, rather than just trying it all at once. I did a talk actually it was just before that Born with the Uni one, so just over 6 months ago, where, I said I had about 20, 30 people in the room. I said, who's using AI in their business at the moment? And there was two people from the same company. One put their hand up and one didn't. And then they stopped and looked at each other, and everyone in the room noticed. And they said, no, we're not. Yes, we are.
Wow.
And so two people that came to an AI seminar didn't realise that they did or didn't use AI in their organisation. I said, that's an issue. Who's leading AI as a transformational change project? It shouldn't just be IT. It needs to have a bit of marketing, because things like, do we use it as to answer our phones, is as much a brand decision as it is a technical decision. And so, that's what we tried to address with Campfire. And then the next step on is, we've done 2 sessions so far. We've got one in 2 weeks' time, towards the end of January. Then we'll be launching an online community for people to share and chat with each other about how they're using AI, because something else that's become very clear is, particularly in smaller companies, but sometimes in medium too, is you might have 1 or 2 people who are keen to use it and others that aren't, or aren't testing and trialing it. And so having a place where people can share, I've done this for sales, or I've done this for recruitment, or I've done this for whatever it might be, is actually really valuable. And so we're building up a set of training modules as well, and then we'll be launching a membership community, again with Dorset Chamber towards the end of the month.
I expect with those talks you've seen a lot of people, and a lot of people have had a lot of different barriers that they've needed to overcome, whether that's going to their manager and asking if they can use Gen AI. What has been the biggest barrier that has come up in those conversations?
I think there's been a sort of selection of common ones rather than one massive one. And I
Okay.
think another thing we talk about on Campfire is, how do you develop pilots? How do you score those, and so decide which ones we should and shouldn't do, but also which ones should we approach first? And then also how you run a pilot for, say, 3 months, score it as to whether it's success or failure, and then how you roll it out further. And I think that's the answer to that one. Generally, to most of the main questions I get is, it's about having a process for adopting AI, because I think most businesses and most people are still at the sort of testing and experimenting phase, and it's really, how do you step on from that? Well, you say, right, dear boss, this is the specific use case I want to try AI with. This is how much time I think it will save me. It will cost this. I want to trial it for 3 months, and at the end we'll review it against these criteria, and then we either roll it out wider and train everyone else and create playbooks, etc., or we revise it and try a different bit of software, or we ditch it because it didn't work. And that kind of framework is another thing that we developed, and we're sharing at training seminars like Dorset Campfire.
So, for anyone listening, especially our candidates, would you suggest there are any particular skills they need to be working on in terms of actually using AI and leveraging it?
Yeah, I mean, I think get yourself into the mindset of testing and piloting, and having clear goals for whether it works or doesn't work. So use this stuff, try this stuff, experiment with it, but also be prepared and accept that some things you will try might not work. And I think that's as much for someone who is working somewhere already as much as it is for a candidate somewhere. I think something that we touched on, in particularly in the Q&A at that Born with Uni event, was around using things like ChatGPT for rewriting covering letters or CVs. And I think that's something I've been lucky enough to speak at 3 universities now about, and also with business leaders. And I think the general consensus is, it's fine to use it. Use ChatGPT to help you rewrite a covering letter and your CV perhaps, or to review it. But what's important is you do that well. So again, having a human in the loop. I think it's really obvious if you get a covering letter that's been written by ChatGPT, particularly if it's from someone in England and it's got Z's instead of S's, or it uses some of those flowery words that are common ChatGPT words. It loves to delve into everything and those kind of things. But if someone's used it well and it's helped them to customize a covering letter to the point where it's probably not obvious to me, and they put within their CV that they did that, I think that's probably a benefit. I think there's kind of, I guess it's like one of those game theory decision tree things almost. You know, if you use it badly and it's obvious, then it's bad. If you use it well and it's not obvious, but you don't mention it, doesn't give you any benefit. But if you used it well, it's not obvious, and you said that you used it, that's a positive, because you've shown then that you can use this technology, and you understand that you need to have checks in its output. And actually, that's a big plus, because businesses are going to be looking for people that can and do use this stuff. You know, if you've got two candidates, one of them has openly said they've used ChatGPT and they've got a great covering letter. You've got another one who's got a great covering letter, but you don't know if they use ChatGPT. Which way are you going to lean? And I think in a world where people want to make people work as effectively and efficiently as they can, they're going to lean towards those that do use it. So I don't think being shy about using it is going to help anyone. And I think if you don't say that you used it and it's obvious you used it, then I think that's the kind of the worst of the three scenarios, I suppose. So yeah, I think try and use it with things that you might not expect. I think, but also be aware of its limitations. I see people recommended, you don't need a lawyer anymore. You can just throw a contract into ChatGPT and get it to review it. I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right? So it might look like it's giving you good advice, but it could be completely wrong. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. I don't have the skills to evaluate it to that extent. But there are other things I can do. I can use it to draft stuff that I might have been struggling with. Perhaps if I was best man, say, and I need to write a best man speech, and I'm not a natural content writer, I could get it to help me with that and then tailor it to myself. So I think you can always find other applications that are useful, and having a play with things like automations to help you with job seeking, I think can be really useful. There's a tool called Zapier, which is free up to a certain level. You could use that to, fire in job alerts in one way, give you some suggestions for which ones you should apply for, perhaps, how you could amend your CV. You could come up with workflows and things, and actually you've developed some skills there that are useful when you get into the business.
It's really interesting what you're saying about the CV side of things, because it's extremely applicable to our audience. But I also read a fact the other day on a human resources website that said 77% of hiring managers in the UK have seen CVs written by ChatGPT or a generative AI program, which were obvious. And I think that's a pitfall, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it's just kind of weeding out those people that don't have the foresight to say, they've kind of they're like halfway there. It's like, oh, you're so close, because you're using it and that's helping you. And I know it's a difficult job market at the moment, and you need to, find every way you can, I'm sure, to apply to more jobs. But making sure you have the human in the loop, making sure that I know I can use ChatGPT to help me rewrite my CV, but has it invented A levels I didn't have? If you're not doing these basic checks, I think I saw one example from a recruiter I know that was on LinkedIn who said she had a CV where someone claimed to have done a qualification that she knew didn't exist. So I forget whether it was I forget what level of qualification it was. It was maybe it was a T level or something, but it was some qualification that she was an expert in that area, and she knew that this didn't exist. And she was just sort of like completely perplexed. But she was like, one, if you're using it to tweak your CV and you're not checking that it hasn't invented qualifications to match what it thinks the job posting wanted, that's quite a red flag that you've not noticed it. But she was kind of impressed that they'd been using it that way, because she said apart from that, the rest of the CV wasn't obvious they'd used ChatGPT.
Okay.
But yeah, I find it fascinating that these are conversations we might not have had, a year ago, maybe. I mean, I've kind of got an AI generated headshot on my LinkedIn at the moment, and I thought, I remember a job I applied for ages ago, and I hope this doesn't still happen because I'm sure it's not best practice, but they wanted a photo included with it. Could I include an AI edited photo?
That becomes a grey area, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does look like me. I've shown it to plenty of my friends and they didn't realise it was AI generated. So does it matter? Is it any different to using a Snapchat filter or something, which some people I'm sure do use? And I think it's kind of the same thing. If you see a photo of someone and they've really badly used Snapchat or TikTok filter and there's sort of almost a smudged face, it's obvious and bad. But little tweaks here and there. Is it any different to photoshopping? Is it? I don't know. It's a really grey area, and I think something else we talk about. I talk about at events and we talk about on Campfire is having a policy and a statement on how you use AI as an organisation. And I think as an individual, have a think about what you are and are not happy to use it for. You might want to use it for some ways. I'm aware of copywriters that are selling their services on the basis that they do not use AI in any form. I'm aware of a PR agency who say in their AI statement that they'll use AI for this, and this, like transcribing calls, etc. But they will never use AI as part of writing a press release because that's a human entirely endeavour. Now, I don't think that's right. I think you can get it to help you, and that's quicker and probably better. But I understand why they're making that statement. And yeah, for a job seeker, have a play with these tools. You can get quite a lot of free use out of ChatGPT. It's not the latest and best model, but you don't need to pay for that at basic level, or using a Copilot within Windows if you're a Windows user, or starting to see things like Apple Intelligence in Siri. Experiment with these things, test them, and understand how they might work.
Yes. So a phrase that you in fact taught me at the Bournemouth talk was AI slop, and so I expect that's what the hiring managers are talking about when they say 77% of people are using AI. It's obvious. So could you maybe tell me a bit more about how to avoid the AI slop, and maybe a bit more about prompting?
Yeah, so sure. So I mean that could be a whole podcast in itself, but
It could be, yes.
Some of the key things to look out for is there are common words that particularly ChatGPT uses. Claude is a bit better at not doing that, to be honest. And Delve is right up there. You'll also notice that stuff written by ChatGPT almost always, and I have no idea why, includes the rocket ship emoji. So it's looking for those kind of things. Also looking for odd formatting. So within bullet point lists, one of the things ChatGPT still does is it will bold the first word in a bullet pointed list and put a colon and then the rest of the bullet point. I don't know why it's picked that format up, but it's something that it does. These are all things that I noticed by sort of seeing obviously generated content. Americanisms, if you're in Britain, where they shouldn't be. So, trash instead of rubbish. Look out for those kind of words. Spelling of things with S's instead of Z's, for example. Those are all great things to keep an eye out for. Spelling, grammar, Oxford commas, all those kind of nuances as well. It tends to sometimes struggle with those. I'm not great as a content writer, but we develop this checklist for us of what we want to look for. But it's those kind of things. Are all the references correct? Are all the facts correct? Are all the numbers correct? Any Americanisms? Common words that it uses, overuse of emojis, all those kind of things.
That's perfect. So one of the reasons that our audience might be listening is because of the whole idea around job creation, or in fact the fact that they may be scared about losing their job because of Gen AI. So what sort of jobs were you potentially looking at in terms of creation then?
So new jobs coming from AI, do you
mean? Yeah.
Yep. So I think something that, and I wrote about this in a newsletter just for Christmas actually, one of the things that OpenAI did when they announced O3, which is their top of the range super smart model, is they also introduced a new pricing tier. So it went from being $20 to being $200 a month. Now, as a business, that goes from being almost a negligible cost to being something that if you were rolling it out for everyone is quite a big chunk of money. And I think there will be times where you need that kind of level of model and times where you don't. So I think we'll start to see people who are managing AI agents and AI use. So you'll start to see people, perhaps it'll be project managers, but I think it might become a more specialised role where people are managing AI automation, but also which tasks are routed to which models to optimise for cost. Now, ultimately, I'm sure that will become that in itself will be automated, but I think there's definitely going to be some roles there around, looking at use cases and playbooks and all that kind of stuff and managing it. I think we'll also start to see things like fact checking becoming part of organisations. So content teams might change from being writers to checkers and editors. So you might be able to put out more blog posts, but less time writing it, but more time effectively checking it. I think you'll also see things like probably in advertising, where you're going to get these massive, bigger scaled ads. I think expertise in understanding and unlocking those is going to be quite important. But yeah, I think I don't know what all of the jobs are going to be, just to be quite frank. And I think anyone that claims to do so is probably misguided. I came up with a few sort of slightly crazy job ideas when I spoke back then. I'm just trying to remind myself what those were. Oh yeah, so things like a knowledge manager. So I think we'll get to a point soon where businesses will have their own large language model that they use, and they'll train it on their own information. You start to see this with Microsoft Copilot. You're going to need people that are experts in throwing the way that data is currently stored through AI to improve it, or modifying that data to get it into AI in the first place. So I think you'll need things like that. I think you'll see things like auditors, and also as we mentioned there, editing I think will become more important than perhaps writing in some respects, because I think this year, I think one of my predictions for this year is we'll see the first AI content scandal or lawsuit, like big case kick off, where either a newspaper picks up something that's AI generated as true and gets sued for it, or perhaps we'll see a celebrity, or perhaps, I think as a business this is a real risk. We'll see a Gerald Ratner moment. Now, for those of you that might not know what that is, Gerald Ratner was a jeweler, and in the 80s or 90s, he famously basically said out loud, "Look, our stuff's a bit shit, but we sell it anyway and people love it," and it absolutely destroyed the company to an extent. Now imagine in the current climate where it's quite easy to create a deep fake of someone, you could imagine someone making a fake of your boss, put it onto Instagram, and it's your boss saying, "Actually, our product's rubbish, you should buy our competitors." Now, I would hope that businesses wouldn't be doing that, but I don't think it's unfeasible that we'll see the first of those kind of cases this year. So I think something else to be, if I was starting out in my career, or if I was looking to get into a new career, I think how to spot fakes, how to critically assess things that I read are all really important skills that perhaps have been slightly overlooked, I think, in education and schools recently. Those would be areas I'd look into as well. That kind of critical thinking, evaluation stuff.
So I've been briefly following the advancements of Sora AI, which isn't yet available in the UK, Europe, but is available in the US. And I'm sure some people listening would have used a VPN to access that, but I haven't done that yet. Have you done that, Luke?
So I've used a couple of other models to generate text to video. I think it's getting close to good. I think I still found... So the example I used to use in the ability of generative AI was the two dogs in a field. So I used to compare one I made about 18 months ago to one I made a couple of months ago now. So to update that slide recently, I tried to generate a video of two dogs running in a field. And with fairly mixed results, I still had a couple of extra paws and things that were still not quite there. But yeah, it's certainly getting a lot better. I think there was an example video I used to use from Sora that was from March of this year, of a drone shot over kind of like an Italian coastline with the waves coming in and out. When I first started showing that, I think I used that at one of the talks we went to.
You did, yeah.
There's a couple of things in that you can spot that it is AI fake. One of them is the waves go away from the coast. That's the main giveaway. Second one is there's people that kind of appear and disappear and sort of merge into the background a bit. There's a new version of that clip that they released in October. I can't find anything wrong with it. I've studied it in immense detail on, I did a presentation in Winchester recently at the Guildhall where I had a ridiculously massive screen that I was projecting onto. And even at that scale and level of detail, I couldn't spot anything in it that told me it was a fake, apart from the OpenAI badge in the bottom right-hand corner.
Yeah.
There's literally nothing in it. So I think we're very close to the point in time where, don't trust anything. You can make voice clones, photos, videos that aren't real. And so, like I said, those evaluation skills are going to be really important.
So do you think that's where the value of maybe a prompt engineer maybe will increase in
Yeah,
businesses?
yeah, I think particularly where you look at, so generating videos or images is great as a playful thing, but as soon as you want to make it about a product photo and it
Hmm.
needs to be, the product needs to stay consistent, that takes real skill using these tools. You know, you need to go into Midjourney or one of the more specialist image generation tools, and actually being able to get to that level, and maybe it's Photoshop, but equally, you know, any of those. You know, we're starting to see experts in AI product shots. So rather than in the olden days where you would have done 10 or 20 product shots and, you know, different setups and different stages, what we're starting to see now is people doing a couple of really good product shots in perhaps a white or green screen background, and then having people that are good to put that into whatever context they need it into. And that's a very new skill, very specific skill, is being able to prompt to generate the images to match a campaign rather than photographing it. And as soon as you talk about being really specific with what you need, which you need for advertising quite often, it's beyond what you can just do as an average person sort of bumbling around on, you know, OpenAI or Sora or whichever tool it is you're using.
So, Luke, what do you look for when you're recruiting for your teams or for your company then?
Sure. I think for us, specific skills are not always as important as adaptability. So making sure someone we think is the right kind of person to, you know, look at a problem, work out how to take it apart and find a solution to it. I used to have an old boss who had a phrase to always be curiously lazy. So that is to say that you know, not to be lazy, but actually, is there an easier way of doing this problem? I think that's the kind of ethic to an extent we would look for. Is, you know, can someone come into a role and actually maybe find a better way of doing it rather than someone that's just going to be very stuck in their way of doing, you know, perhaps that's writing a press release or whatever it might be, fixing a particular problem. Actually, do they have the skills to look at, you know, using all these other tools, you know, the wide range of tools that are out there to get the best output? So yeah, I think probably adaptability and that kind of innovation thinking. I think something that's also really important, which I would personally always dig into in an interview, is looking at someone to admit that they've tried stuff that also failed. I think it's underrated to be able to accept that, you know, if you're trying to do things, sometimes it's going to fail, and what you learn from that and how you approach that is actually also really important. So those are kind of things. But yeah, mostly for us, it's going to be looking at, you know, the right kind of people. If there's some experience and knowledge in the specific field, great. But more so, are they adaptable? You know, are they able to pick up our workbooks and go with it? You know, have they got the right kind of skills that they've been trying stuff, or are they kind of stuck where they are?
I really like that phrase of curiously lazy. I think that's great. And it links
Yeah, it's
well
my old
with
boss,
the.
the one at the fax job. That was his approach to life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it makes things easier, doesn't it? So, um, and it links
I
well
think
with
that's
the
something
fact.
you get with AI, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is.
Can I
It
do this
is.
easier? Is one of the first use cases for a lot of it. So another really useful thing that we look for when we're recruiting is that people are constantly learning. So not just that adaptability, but also people that are curious to learn more skills and develop themselves in their career. And you know, one thing that is certain is technology is going to keep changing, and I think someone that's going to be able to do that and is keen to learn is always going to be a good candidate.
So, in terms of skills, then, what do you think these people that you recruit for would possess? You've spoken about attributes, but in terms of like pure skill, what do you think these people would be learning or have already learned?
I guess that's going to depend on the role really specifically. So looking
Yeah.
at are the tools they use kind of up to date or are they old tools? That might be one factor, I suppose, that would indicate if people are learning new things. But also, you know, I think that is the kind of thing that's more going to come out in an interview than necessarily on skills that'll be in a CV. But I think showing a willingness to learn and train and develop is something that everyone can put without it being really generic. So really specifically, you know, I'd like to learn more about how I can use AI in the workplace, or I'd like to develop my skills around design or coding, whatever it might be. Just that willingness to learn, I think, but being specific about what you want to learn is a good indicator.
So that being said, then what do you think your team will look like, or could potentially look like in the next year? Do you think there'll be niches within your team that are AI specific, for example?
Yeah, so we have a couple of people who work on sort of AI application development that joined us very recently, and I think that might continue to grow. I think one of the areas we're looking at is, where can we grow that isn't just adding headcount, and I think a lot of businesses will be having that conversation. So yeah, are there roles? I don't know what those are, to be honest. I think that will kind of evolve with time. I think we will see that, as we sort of mentioned earlier, managing the use of AI might become almost within a project manager's role as much as within a IT or sort of development role. So yeah, maybe we'll see that more of that as well.
What is one piece of advice you would give our candidates who are either already in tech or are looking to break into the tech industry?
Experiment, try stuff, be curious. I years ago I bought a smart speaker for my home just because I wanted to understand how people might use it in the home environment. I think that kind of test and learn, even in outside of work, is just as important as inside sometimes.
That's perfect. So thank you so much for your time, Luke. It's been great to hear what you've got to say on generative AI, and you will certainly have helped our audience and our candidates. So thank you so much for that.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.